Welcome to the Studio B podcast. Today's episode is titled Navigating AI Ethically. We'll bring into awareness ethical issues that arise from AI to ensure best practices and support your AI literacy. We are the Learning Design and Digital Innovation team at the Faculty of Education. My name is Eduardo. I'm the Learning Technology Specialist. And here today I have two of my colleagues. Folks, please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Melody. I'm the Marketing and Communications Assistant here at LDDI.
Hi there, I'm Bremen, and I'm a Learning Technology Rover here at LDDI.
Perfect. Thank you. So we'll start with a land acknowledgement. And Melody, you're going to do that for us.
Yeah, so today we're recording at UBC's Vancouver campus, which is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam people. So as we're engaging with emerging technologies, especially artificial intelligence, we're recognizing the importance of doing that in ways that are mindful, sustainable, and just. We commit to practices that honor Indigenous knowledge systems, recognize urgent environmental changes, and support ethical innovation that respects both people and the planet.
Perfect. Thank you, Melody. So a couple of things for the audience. We're going to have timestamps on the video description so you can navigate through it as you wish. Also, we'll have links in the description to all the articles and studies that we refer to. And finally, subscribe to the channel, comment, and share this with your community. All right, so the outline for today, we're going to start with the landscape of the AI ethics issue. We'll briefly discuss that to bring it into your awareness. Then we're going to explore different specific areas of concern, things that you need to know about problematic things happening on the AI ethics landscape. And finally, we'll share with you some considerations for using AI ethically. So we're hoping, our goal is that by listening to this podcast, you'll be able to boost critical thinking and ethical reasoning, enhance responsible use and decision making, understand, question, and critique AI, and finally, develop some principles that guide ethical use. Great, so let's dive in and talk about the AI ethics issue. So something that often happens when we get technology is that it can evolve very fast, right? And we've seen that with the internet and computers and different things. And people get very excited when that happens. Companies definitely want to go all the way. They want to keep developing the technology. They're very enthusiastic about it, and they have an agenda, of course. And then the problem is that we find issues that were completely unexpected. And some of these issues are actually being dragged from issues that already exist. So problems get magnified. And then the issues that we do not have even a legal system to know how to deal with these problems. And that is something that has definitely happened with AI because the development of AI has been really fast, right? Like from 2022, I mean, we've had AI for a long time, but from 2022 with ChatGPT, it just exploded. And with that, some issues exploded. Now, the problem is that people get very excited, as I was mentioning, with the bright side of AI. But then we forget about the dark side of AI, so to speak. And that's not to give it a negative connotation, like it is something bad, but it simply is referring to being aware of problems that happen when we develop new technologies. And this is the way that we can actually ensure that then we will have a right development of the use of those technologies. This is why we need to pay attention to these issues so they don't slip and then we have huge consequences. And this is something that typically happens in the ethical domain. So I'm going to share with you guys some interesting, compelling data here that I have. This is fresh for you. You haven't seen it. So we'll see. But this is going to point towards the problem we're discussing today. Okay. So some compelling data and findings on ethical issues. So AI could consume up to half of the world's data center electricity by the end of this year, 2025. A single AI query can take up to 23 times more energy than a Google search. And large data centers draw millions of gallons of water per day. This next one is a big one. AI magnifies human bias by 15 to 25%. And those who interact with it become more biased themselves. Unless they know the issue, of course.
I don't think I realized that it magnified bias by that much. I sort of knew a little bit about AI and bias, but that's quite a significant figure, 25%.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's just the same as human bias. So is it really that different if I just take the AI opinion? But this is suggesting that maybe there's actually a more sinister side to that.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you're not aware of it.
Yeah.
Then you can keep subscribing to that bias, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Great. What else? AI consistently produces and reinforces stereotypes in image generation, even with neutral prompts. China has deployed 700 million surveillance cameras, many equipped with real-time AI facial recognition. And that's raising concerns of mass surveillance, of course. A study conducted in Germany reveals that most people rarely think about AI in this AI era we're finding ourselves, and particularly less when it comes to issues like fairness, accountability, and transparency. This has been found in many countries as well, and that's a big problem.
So they're using it, but not thinking about it.
Yeah, like you're just using it and no like thought around the problems that it could create.
Right.
Or how your information is being used and different things. Okay, and then we have a lot of error rates happening with AI. It can go from as low as 1% up to 70% in some cases. So that means that AI is not completely reliable. And a lot of people think that sometimes, and that can create some issues of not checking in, So this is happening because there's an awareness gap. People do not know that these issues can arise from AI. And this is why we need to really be very intentional in learning about it. And that's where education comes in. We want to educate ourselves on the ethical concerns, ethical issues that arise with AI. So as I was mentioning, not just focusing on the exciting things of AI, and we like AI, we support AI, we use AI, but also focusing on the dark side of AI. And this is why we're exploring this today. We want to see what are these specific things that may happen when we use AI that are ethically concerning. So let's dive into those areas of concern. We're gonna talk about the specific things that you can focus on when you're using AI. So we have a couple of them here. Let's go one by one.
I think something that's been on a lot of people's mind is the environmental impact. If we want to start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So those were some great stats that you gave us earlier, Eduardo, a little bit about how AI is using energy like electricity and water. AI has really high electricity and energy demands, and often the energy that's used for those to power the data centers that run AI systems is coming from fossil fuel sources. So obviously that's creating carbon emissions and contributing to the climate crisis and climate change. So in terms of electricity demands and how that has been increasing with the use of AI, I found a stat that said that Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, they recently announced that their greenhouse gas emissions are up 48% since 2019. So that is a huge jump, and that's directly related to the increase in AI. At the same time, Microsoft has also announced that its emissions are up 29% since 2020. So again, like another huge jump directly related to AI.
And I thought these companies had recently committed to, zero emissions in 2030 or something like that. So
yeah, how are they going to get there with...
Feels like they're quietly sort of losing their interest in...
Yeah, that's the thing, like this exciting, shiny new product, like these environmental goals maybe go by the wayside when you have something that's such a big like profit generator for these companies. And so AI is like also notoriously just really thirsty for energy in general. When you're using AI, according to one researcher, one query to ChatGPT uses about as much energy as using a light bulb for 20 minutes. So that's a pretty big amount for just like a single query.
Yeah, and people are not aware of that. When I heard that for the first time, I was like, whoa, I had no idea this was the case. And now I'm more mindful when I'm prompting. Yeah. Sometimes I know that I can prompt it again and I hesitate. I'm like, right. Oh, that's going to, consume quite a bit. So it kind of like helps you in that
And
way.
I mean, even if you are sitting there at home thinking, well, an LED bulb for 20 minutes, it's actually not that much energy, but you have to think of that like, if you're participating, how many millions of other people are having that same thought of like, well, it's not that much more if it's just me.
Yeah.
But it's not just you, of course.
Yeah.
And potentially billions of people too.
Potentially. Yeah.
And it's not just our own like individual impact. It's about, how much energy are these companies using to train their AI systems and kind of perpetuate this as well. So that is a really huge problem. Another big problem with the environment and AI is the amount of fresh water that AI consumes. So AI, the data centers that are again powering these AI systems use a lot of fresh water to cool their servers and their electrical components. And according to one estimate, AI-related infrastructure may soon consume 6 times more water than Denmark. So more water than an entire country, which is 6 million people.
Oh.
So that's pretty wild. And the strain, like AI data centers are built a lot of the time in local communities, and sometimes in places that are already short on water. There are some data centers in Arizona that are causing this already water-stressed region to become even more water-stressed.
Yeah.
They can exacerbate droughts and also perpetuate sort of unfairness, these large companies taking water resources from people in those communities.
Yeah, and then you think about the people that have no access to water, people like in suffering really in parts of the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds like what you were talking about, Eduardo, about like an existing problem really getting exacerbated by technology that doesn't quite have the regulation and policy surrounding it yet.
Yeah. And that's why it's important to become aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then on top of all that, there's also like the resource extraction and electronic waste piece of it. So AI uses a lot of hardware. You know, we say like AI is in the cloud, but there are actually computers that have to run these AI systems. Those computers get old and they break down and they create electronic waste. And also making those computers, according to the United Nations Digital Economy Report from 2024, making a 2-kilogram computer actually requires 800 kilograms of raw materials.
Really?
So that's a huge amount of resource extraction that's going into building these computing systems.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So a lot of resources being spent through AI, like lots of them.
Yeah.
And it can feel like it's not the case because you're just interacting with something digitally.
You're very disconnected.
Yeah.
The material cost.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. Thank you, Melody. So next up, privacy, security, and surveillance.
Yeah. So I'm going to tackle this one. And I think, you kind of gave us a warning shot, Eduardo, when you were mentioning about in China, the surveillance cameras and how much that AI tracking is used with facial recognition, for example, and social media scrubbing where, millions of posts can be gathered and summarized by AI very easily. But from what I've read, this is not just the case in China. It's here in Canada and the United States as well, where there are several companies that have been contracted by our government agencies specifically to scrub social media posts and online profiles in order to gather information. So obviously this can be used in a beneficial way to, track criminals, for instance.
Yeah.
But you also have to consider the overall impact of that technology existing and improving once again, an issue of surveillance being exacerbated by this technology. Yeah. And I think that we definitely have come to just sort of expect that surveillance and like a lack of privacy is just the reality that we just sort of, we click through those privacy agreements and sort of just accept that is how things are without necessarily questioning or saying, maybe I don't actually want to use this if it's going to infringe on my data this much. And what is that going to be used for?
Yeah. That also makes me think about like how these technologies can kind of exacerbate inequalities that already exist. So we have a lot of inequalities in our justice system already. For example, racialized people are more likely to end up in the justice system. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that using these technologies probably is also perpetuating a lot of those existing problems.
Yeah, it definitely brings to mind a scary thought that if, AI is being used in cases like there's one example from 2022 where someone was riding their bike past a house and then Google shared the data that was collected automatically about their location. And because they had been biking past a burglarized home, they became a suspect in the case. Mm-hmm. They were cleared in the end. Right. But it definitely brings into question, is AI going to be used in these sorts of cases? And so are we concerned about its biases and how that can sway the justice system?
Yeah. Or even the errors too, right? Like in this case.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Because we might assume like, it makes no mistakes, but then it can make mistakes that really hinders people, like in this case. And what are the issues of, governments and, companies getting this information? How does that affect us?
Well, I mean, for starters, they can use your data to train models. Mm-hmm. So there's inherently a consideration of your, personal sort of information, thoughts, creations kind of being used without your consent. Mm-hmm. So that's concerning. But also like, for instance, to target you with, like advertisement, for instance, that you might not be like, might not want that to be happening, might not want those companies to have this information sort of to manipulate you based on this data, and, you know, sway you, you know, by collecting information that you didn't really give them consent to collect, or you did, but know that you did.
So it seems like we're losing our privacy in many ways. Like if you think like, I don't know, like 50 years ago, there were no systems collecting that much data. But now it seems like even with the cameras and everything, like you're really being tracked all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Like these location-specific tracking things, like, you know, I'll go to like a place with my phone and then, you know, a day later I'll get an advertisement for somewhere else in that area, or like that same coffee shop that I was at or whatever. And yeah, again, seems like having AI systems, if you're inputting any of your personal information into that, just magnifies the problem.
Yeah. And I think there's also the issue of criminals accessing this information, right? Like hackers and all this stuff. That might be my biggest concern.
Yeah, for sure. I was just about to bring that up. It's one thing in the hands of like a agency and people that have their concerns about that, but considering it in the hands of malicious actors, then there's definitely a question of, do we want to support the proliferation of certain technologies, certain AI technologies that can be used very prominently for surveillance by, you know, criminals.
Yeah. So if we think about the first point, environment, we need to be aware of what happens with the environment, how we are affecting it. In this case, we need to be careful with the information that we put in AI, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So that's how you can mitigate it in this case.
Yeah, like really do your due diligence about what tools you're using. And if you're not sure, then it may not be the right time for you to use it.
Yeah.
Like those terms and conditions.
Yeah. And we recently made another episode that focuses on that, right?
Yeah, for folks at UBC, if you are at UBC, we have those guidelines from UBC that give a lot of information about what is safe to put.
Yeah, we'll link that in the video description. Okay, so next up is bias. This is a big one.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you set up things well by mentioning how AI systems can magnify human bias. Was it 15 to 25%, I think? Yeah. And that may seem confusing, as I mentioned before, because we think of how AI has gained its knowledge by training off of our information. So if, you know, it's trained off of us, then how can it be more biased than us, or how can it magnify our bias?
Right.
But I think what you have to think about is the fact that the way that we interact with it is different than the way that we interact with another person. When we hear someone else speaking, we're considering, okay, it's coming from their lens. That's their opinion, you know.
Right.
But when you talk to an AI, you don't really know how the AI's opinion came to be. It's a black box, right? And it can feel like you're just talking to this omnipotent being that has, you know, infinite knowledge. You ask it a question and it just magically pulls it out of, you know, a hat.
Yeah.
And so when it tells you, you know, something that has a slight bias towards a certain viewpoint, a certain culture, a certain attitude, then it's very easy to just accept that as, you know, that's the accepted view.
Yeah.
Right?
That is the truth.
Yeah. But then when you actually look at where the data is trained from, it is majorly, you know, Western view, English speaking. And then, of course, you know, when you're going into certain topics, those specific topics will have their bias too, based on, you know, who's written the most work about the topic.
Yeah. It was interesting. When I was doing some of the prep and reading about environmental issues for this, one of the articles mentioned that AI actually tends to take a much softer view on like what we should do about environmental concerns than, you know, a lot of other people would suggest. Like, so it says, you know, maybe we need to take like slow, gradual actions for the climate crisis and like make small changes.
That might not be what expert scientists are saying.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
So unless you press it to like cite your sources, tell me who you're getting, and then go double check that, you know, then you can maybe see, okay, now I see where you're getting this information.
Yeah.
But if you're just saying like, give me a review of, you know, this and that, and then especially if you come at it saying, you know, well, I'm not so sure about this whole climate change thing. I mean, are we really sure it's real at all? Then, you know, the AIs can be like, well, that, you know, that
changes.
That's very smart of you to say that. But, you know, here's what scientists think. And it kind of, you know, reinforces your bias in a way.
It does. Yeah.
Takes that softer approach, even softer, maybe if you come at it with a bit of a climate denial.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So it seems like people often miss or could miss that the data itself is biased, right? And that's the main issue. Like people would assume like, oh, it's gathering information from all around the world. So, you know, it's not going to be biased. It's going to be, it's going to be fair, but that's definitely not the case.
No, and
because
this
of
is
training.
this is something like OpenAI, for instance. They are very clear in their, if you read on their website about ChatGPT, even the latest models, they're very clear that that bias exists. And although they work to try and remove it, it is a very difficult process, right?
Yeah.
Because even the people who are trying to remove that bias have their own bias too. Like it's very
Really difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, and it begs the question of if there is even such a thing as an unbiased opinion, right?
Well, that's why you probably need to bring in people from different cultures as well, people with different views to train the models as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And double check, like if you're getting information from an AI, make your own opinions about it and cross-reference it against expert information that you are aware of the source.
Yeah. I think knowing that the information is going to be biased is already a big step in mitigating the issue, because it's going to make you more critical. It's going to make you sharper as you interact with the content.
Yeah. Just then, if it's one thing you can do the next time you interact with AI, especially generative AI chatbots, just be really critical of the very next response you get. Examine it for any piece of bias you can, and think about how definitive are you that you can identify bias in an AI response.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Bremen. Next one, language and cultural divides.
Yeah, so this, I think, is really just a tie on to my last point. Really making it clear that this bias can have negative impacts on groups. So not just on, maybe you're sitting there using it and the bias kind of misleads you. But then there's also a consideration that certain groups of people, and this is a big ethical issue, aren't really able to take advantage of AI or benefit from AI in the same way that other groups are because of the bias inherent in the training sets in the outputs. So if you don't speak English, that is already putting you at a disadvantage in your use of ChatGPT, for example, because it is biased towards, it has the most English data.
Right, yeah.
Especially if you speak like a much less spoken language. And then, of course, with cultures, there's, concerns like if you ask a lot of AI image generators to generate images of Native American culture, for instance, or a Native American story circle, then you get this very stereotyped picture. It's like, well, hold on, this is one specific Native American group that you see representing, or not even just a caricature.
Yeah, a mishmash of like a bunch of types put together.
That can be insulting. Even.
That could definitely be insulting and push people away from using it in ways that might actually be beneficial because, it's very difficult to overcome these sort of.
Yeah. Another issue that I see is that in the future, I mean, this is already happening, but people are using AI for efficiency, and it's going to keep evolving, I think. Yeah. It's here to stay. So if some people have greater access to it, that's also a divide. That's also some inequality happening or being magnified, as we said in the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah. And if it's like, okay, either I have to accept using this AI, which kind of diminishes my culture, diminishes my language, or else I get left behind, in a fast-paced work environment, for example, then that's, a big ethical problem that I think AI companies really need to tackle. And it's something that we should be aware of and we should push for.
Very interesting. And this connects very well with the next point, Indigenous data sovereignty. Right, Nelly?
Yeah, absolutely. So this connects, like you said, back to what Bremen was just talking about, with AI kind of creating stereotypes about certain groups and in particular Indigenous peoples. So maybe I'll just start by explaining what Indigenous data sovereignty is, because maybe not everybody knows. So Indigenous data sovereignty describes the fundamental rights of Indigenous peoples to control, access, interpret, manage, and collectively own data about their communities, their lands, and their cultures. And so the foundation for this idea of data sovereignty really rests on Indigenous peoples' inherent rights to autonomous governance. So their inherent rights to have control over their own lives, their own governance, their data. So historically, Indigenous peoples in Canada and in many places around the world have had very little say over how their data is collected and used by government agencies, by companies, by a lot of other groups in this colonial system. And so this is again, like this is a problem that's been happening for a long time and still happens today, but AI is magnifying this problem because what AI is doing is extracting these massive amounts of any like online content, including Indigenous people's online content and data. And it turns that data into a product where the original authors and keepers of that knowledge really have no control over how it's used or what happens to it. And so for Indigenous communities, this really means that their data is being scooped up, it's taken out of their control, and might be used in a way that's perpetuating stereotypes, perpetuating colonial patterns, and other harms that are kind of already existent in our society, but are again magnified by AI.
Definitely. That's like a strong case of abuse, right? It's kind of like what happened like many years ago, happening in a digital domain in a different way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's still happening today for sure.
So how can people become aware of this one and take action to make sure that it doesn't happen? What can we do? Any ideas?
Yeah, so there are actually a lot of Indigenous scholars who've been doing some really great work on this, including at UBC. So there's the Indigenous data stewardship movement that's standing against sort of these extractive uses of AI. I think part of it also, too, is building that literacy about use of AI and how AI is taking Indigenous data, harvesting it, and turning it into these sort of algorithmic mishmash of stereotype and that sort of thing. I guess like as a person using AI, again, it's important just to be critical of the outputs you're getting.
Yeah, so we keep coming to the theme of awareness, right? Being aware of these issues. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it's not like they're bad in that sense. I mean, they're problematic, but becoming aware of them is the first step to take the action so it can evolve into something that's hopefully more fair.
Yeah, it's like the technology isn't inherently
exactly. Yeah,
it's these uses that we're talking about that you need to be aware of in order to sort of push back against those foul play.
Yeah. And I think this is the work that many people have done when technologies start evolving. Like some people begin to focus what problems are arising from this so we can make the changes. And it's going to keep happening, right? As technology evolves, as new things come up, this is going to be part of that dynamic always. Okay. The next one is labor exploitation. So a lot of people do not know this, but AI depends on hidden human labor and often are outsourced to low-wage workers. So this raises ethical concerns about fairness, transparency, and exploitation in the global AI supply chain. So for instance, OpenAI's ChatGPT relied on Kenyan workers earning less than $2 an hour. Yeah, that's pretty bad. And also they were like working with very toxic content, which had created some psychological distress.
Right.
So something that we have seen also with the production of computers, and different things happening in different parts of the world. This is something to be aware of as well.
Yeah. Just like with those other products where, the more it's talked about, like, hey, these exploitative practices aren't good, the more you see initiatives by companies being like, well, we didn't use them, you should use our product. And then you can say, okay, good, I will. Right? Yeah. But people have to be aware for the companies to feel like it's worthwhile to actually stop doing these things, because they really care about their bottom line.
Mm-hmm. So how can people have a choice here? Probably would be to know how each company gets their work done. From what sources, right? To see who's being more transparent, who's being more fair. So this is when we come to finding those transparency statements, I guess, found in websites and by companies.
Yeah, for sure. And then vote with your wallet based on what you find.
Yeah.
And I think, looking at like political action too, like making sure that you're pushing governments to put in place like regulations and policies that are going to hopefully, not always, but like hopefully force these AI companies to be more ethical in the way that they're using labor.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, and the final one is hallucinations. So hallucination is, it became the Cambridge Dictionary Word of the Year in 2023. It refers to when AI makes up content. So something that people might miss is that AI can completely make up stuff when you interact with it. So people can assume that all the content that ChatGPT gives you, for instance, is accurate, is true, but we have seen many cases in which that is simply not the case. It makes up information.
And it sounds so confident about it.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing. Yeah, that's the tricky thing. So that means that when we're interacting with AI, we need to be aware that it might be not true. Like the information we're getting might be completely fictional, even though it may sound like very well presented, right? So there have been some cases. ChatGPT inventing fake legal cases in 2023, which created a lot of issues. Or then Claude AI making up books and references. I have experienced those, like giving me like references and books, and I'm like, great. And then the next day, you didn't find them. Or then like quotes from famous people. Just making them up completely, or saying that a quote was attributing a quote to someone, and then the next day attributing it to someone different.
Yeah. I've heard this is a big problem with like academic papers as well. Like if you're asking ChatGPT for like research information, it'll just completely make up papers that don't exist.
Yeah, I heard about that too. Another big one is impossible architecture or physics in images, right? So you see images and like you see
in the image.
You see things that are just impossible, right? Great. So these are the things we need to be aware of, the different areas. We'll put it up again in the screen, and also in the description, so you can go back to them. So let's continue now with our last section, which focuses on considerations for using AI ethically. And Melody, you're going to be presenting that to us.
Yeah. So I have a bit of a list of like some questions you can ask yourself when you're considering how and even whether to use AI for a task at all. So the first one I like to think about is like, do I even need to use AI for this task? Could I actually do a better job or do it faster if I just did it myself? Like, I think it can be a bit of a like, knee-jerk reaction to be like, oh, I need to get this thing done quickly. I'll just like use Copilot or use ChatGPT to come up with an answer for me. But then I'll like get the response that it gives me and I'm like, oh, like this is not at all what I wanted. This is not actually that helpful. I'll have to spend a lot of time either reprompting or editing it to make it better. So like sometimes it's just easier for me to write that thing myself or
you end up wasting time.
Yeah, especially when you consider all these ethical concerns that are still online. It's like, okay,
right. Yeah.
Maybe I could do it in the same amount of time as the AI, and maybe it would feel easier to just do it into the AI.
Yeah.
But then I'm also kind of supporting this industry at a time where it's not quite found its feet. So
yeah, there's a lot of concerns about it. Yeah.
Thinking about the implications, right?
Sure.
That's going to have.
Yeah, that actually feeds really well into like the next question I have, which is like, what are the risks or drawbacks of using AI for this task? What are the advantages? So like when you're going to use AI, thinking a lot about those pros and cons, taking into consideration those ethical issues that we've been talking about, and just making a really informed decision about what are the advantages or disadvantages of using AI for this task. Another question you can think about is like, what is my own viewpoint on AI? Am I for it? Am I against it? Do I feel uncertain about it? And like, how does that viewpoint inform my use of the tool? So if I'm being asked to like explore AI for work, I can think about like, oh, how do I feel about this? Does it make me feel good to use it or not? Just taking into consideration your own sort of feelings and opinions on it.
That is a great point. I think that's something that we all need to ask ourselves at some point. Am I in favor or against? And maybe it's not a yes or no question. So in some areas, it might be, yes, I see the potential of AI. I like it. But we also need to be aware of the things you disagree with or you might be concerned about, like the things that we have highlighted today, especially. That's the thing that makes me feel like, not really so sure about AI. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of, again, sort of feeding into that, like, what is my lived experience and how is it informing my use of AI? So, taking into account my own experiences, my own like social and cultural context, my own history, like how does that change how I'm using this tool versus how someone else might use it and see it?
Does it feel really great for me because, I'm part of like the dominant cultural group and a straight guy, it's like really easy peasy for me and everything seems to align with my views here.
Right. Yeah. It's like perfectly designed for me.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And again, thinking like how does that lived experience then like impact the way I'm seeing bias in these tools? Do I actually know how to detect bias and misinformation that's present in AI generated content? do I know how to detect my own biases? Like, it can be really worthwhile to kind of think about, like, what's the context that I'm coming from? What biases might I be bringing into this work? Even like bringing into the way I'm prompting this AI engine.
Yeah.
So thinking about that.
That's a valuable skill, because many people might think like AI skills is basically to know how to prompt it effectively. But I think having that critical eye is the skill as well, like having that ethical consideration as you interact with it is part of the AI literacy piece that people need to develop in this AI age.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the next question I have is like, do I know who created this AI tool and what were their objectives? What were their aims and values of the person or company who created the tool? Thinking about like, what was the intention behind this tool? I think like a lot of the time we think that like technology and the people who create technology always have like good intentions, but I think sometimes like they just either haven't really thought about the consequences.
Yeah.
Sometimes like the tool, there's just not been a lot of thought put into the ways that it would have like ethical and other implications. So taking a good look at like the company and their own practices and all of those things around them as well. And similarly, like, do I know who trains this tool and what data set was used for training it? Because that's really going to impact the input or the output that it's giving me and the information it kind of feeds out to me.
Definitely.
So those are some of the questions that you can think about when you're thinking about whether or not to use AI. I just have a few other like sort of more broader considerations for using AI in hopefully an ethical manner. So one is that just to remember that you are actually responsible for checking and evaluating that AI output. Like, AI can make mistakes. It can have stereotype and bias. And you are the person who is on the other end of that. You're the human in the loop. And you need to be the one who's like looking at that content and saying, okay, like this is a problem. I need to remove this. I need to edit it. You're the one who's responsible for that.
One thing I wanted to touch on regarding that is the Google AI summaries. So that's like a really good example where I think people, as it's like becoming more and more common to see those at the top of your search results, people are getting more and more used to just reading that as the very first thing.
Yeah.
And then not reading anything else that they just searched for. And I can't tell you how many times I've read the AI summary and been like, that's half true information and half made up information based on that actually gives me the wrong answer.
Right.
It's like, check those.
Yeah.
Please check those.
And I think in the previous episode, I shared, I can't remember the exact number, but there was a high percentage of people who never checked the accuracy of AI information. And
there's people who make mistakes.
Yeah, and they are using it in the workplace, right? So it's your responsibility really to ensure that you're using AI effectively and ethically. Yeah.
Yeah. And in a similar sort of vein, like you want to make sure that you're carefully evaluating not just the output of an AI tool, but like evaluate the tool itself. So like if you're going to use an AI tool, play around with it, see what it does, take a look at those terms and conditions, like really have a comprehensive look at what this tool is, what the purpose was, who it was created by, all of those things, so that you're kind of like, it's about being an informed consumer, I guess.
Right.
And using this technology in a way that makes sense for your context and also your values.
Just because it's free doesn't mean she couldn't do quality control.
Exactly. Yeah. And, if you're a student, staff, or a faculty member here at UBC, you want to like also consider those UBC guidelines and how the tool that you're using actually interacts with those guidelines. So thinking about UBC specific content.
See our previous podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our previous episode.
We have a lot of great information in that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one is be transparent about your use of AI. So don't hide the fact that you're using AI, like from your colleagues or your readers or whoever it is. Like it's really important to be upfront that you've used AI for something so that, people don't just think it's coming from like, like if you're saying something like that should have been deeply researched and you've like pulled it from AI, like you maybe question that and your reader should know that like this information came from AI and there could be mistakes in it. Similarly with images, like this is an AI image. It was created by this, like it wasn't an artist who made this, for example.
Yeah, and I think if you use it ethically and also within the UBC guideline framework, then you'll be much more confident to be transparent about it, right?
Exactly.
For sure. Yeah. Another one is learning how to prompt AI engines to actually, get your desired response. So prompting effectively can actually help reduce some of those problems like environmental impact on a personal level, like fewer prompts means less energy used. And if you're prompting it effectively, it can also kind of help to reduce the bias in the output. You still need to, of course, check that output to make sure it is what you wanted, but learning how to prompt effectively can be really helpful. And then last thing I would say is just really keep researching and learning about AI. Even if you're kind of scared of AI or feel unsure about it, it's becoming so ubiquitous in our daily lives that I think it's really important to have the AI literacy about it and to know what the ethical issues are, know what the different platforms are and what they do, because it's going to be part of our lives kind of whether we like it or not.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So keep researching, keep learning, share your knowledge with others. Building that AI literacy piece is really crucial.
Excellent. Thank you, Melody. Anything you would like to add before we wrap up?
Let us know what you find in your research.
Definitely. Yeah. Leave a comment. We'll be making more of these episodes focused on AI. And we hope that today we really help you with developing AI literacy. And we're happy to keep connecting with you. And we'll see you in the next podcast episode. Thank you.